All right, moving back on to the Great Wave, or Under the Great Wave of Kanagawa. This is a woodblock print. We've mentioned woodblock prints before. The thing that you need to remember about woodblock prints is that you've got a piece of wood, and for the image, of course, you have to cut around it, so it's it's a relief carving. So you cut away any part that you don't want to be in the image, right? So every line is something that sticks up. But the thing you need to know about color woodblock prints is for each color, you have to make a different block. So obviously you have your base drawing, and that's how you determine where it gets carved. But if a print has 5, 6, 7 different colors, that means you have to have 5, 6, 7 different as identical as possible wood blocks, so that the different colors can be added appropriately. And then, of course, when you've got your block and you've got your ink on it, you put the piece of paper over it and you rub it so that color gets on the piece of paper, and then you get the next block with a different color, put that color on it, put the same piece of paper over it. So it's a layering process, and so you can see how difficult it would be. So, I see 1, 2, 3, that's the color of the 4, the black would be one color, and the different shades of black would be the same color. At least 4 different colors here. So moving on. All right, so here's our piece, Under the Great Wave of Kanagawa. It's also known as the Great Wave. It was from a piece called 36 Views of Mount Fuji. I'll talk about Mount Fuji in just a moment. Our painter, our artist is Hokusai. So we're dealing with the 19th century, mid-19th century stuff. America's around, right? We'll talk more about what's happening politically in just a moment. So it's polychrome, more than one color, woodblock print, and color on paper. All right, so a little bit about the woodblock prints. We've already have some familiarity with woodblock prints from Japan because, of course, they're a great influencer of Mary Cassatt, and actually Degas as well. He's the one who got Mary Cassatt to go to that Japanese print exhibition in Europe. I think it was in Paris. So the term we want to remember about woodblock prints is, well, one thing is that they started with Japanese scriptures, an easy way to disseminate Japanese Buddhist scriptures in Japan. Buddhism is not the native religion of Japan. We'll talk about that actually in class. It's Shintoism. So the term ukiyo-e, so that's the Japanese woodblock prints made during the Edo period. I've mentioned the Edo period before. So the term means floating world, so it has to do with the idea of the impermanence of life. And in fact, most of the popularity of these kinds of prints initially started with prints that were depicting activities from the pleasure district that I mentioned earlier. So, which is why when you look these prints up, you'll see a lot of rather pornographic pieces. They focused on courtesans and the life of a courtesan often, and so you can imagine what that would include. But sometimes they obviously focused on these more domestic scenes of getting ready, and that's, of course, something that clearly influenced Cassatt here. So Hokusai doesn't do this kind of print, though. He focuses on kind of the everyday, normal people. All right, Mount Fuji, you need to know. So it's the highest mountain in Japan. It's right outside of Tokyo, and so it's visible, at least it was, all across Tokyo. Of course, you've got skyscrapers that get in the way. So obviously, it kind of looms large in the Japanese imagination, especially those who live in Tokyo. It was considered sacred, still is in some ways. Over and over again, we see, the sacredness of mountains. The sacredness of mountains, can't underplay that. So there was kind of developed a Fuji cult. People who would want to climb the mountain as a pilgrimage. You might think, oh, Fuji cult, but remember, cult just means that it's something that you venerate. We talked about the cult of Mary back in the Middle Ages. So it's not necessarily full of people wearing black Nikes and waiting for the end of the world. So a lot of tourists were coming to Tokyo at the time. Obviously, it's a big, big city, and so Hokusai made these prints to sell to the people who were part of the cult of Fuji, as well as tourists. And so, of course, woodblock prints, like all prints, are really good and easy to no, they're not easy to create, but you can make many prints, right? So it's a good way to make money. I mentioned he did 36 of these prints. This is one of them. It's a red Fuji. This is a very well-known one. This one and the Great Wave are the best known, probably. Here's another one. Just this really beautiful aesthetic. I'll say spare, but it's not really spare because you can see there's really great thought and detail. You know, people on top of the, right, some cranes, really beautiful. Another one, that one has a lot of color. Holy cow. Okay, so a little bit more. Landscapes were a major genre in Chinese and Korean art, and they took a while to get much interest in Japan, but they eventually became popular in the 1700s. Because in part of the dissemination of Dutch landscape engravings at that time, even though Japan was experiencing a period of isolationism, where there weren't supposed to be things being traded in and out, but maybe they made an exception for these, or somehow they got snuck in. But the Dutch landscape engravings had a great influence on the artists of the time, and so that got passed on, and so there developed this interest in landscape, even though it had existed in Korea and China before it. So you can see there's a Dutch landscape engraving. You can see, so if you look at that and then look at Hokusai, you can see how that could develop from the Dutch idea. But the Japanese, and especially Hokusai, were radically innovative in terms of how they colored their works. This polychrome print stuff is just crazy. Wow. Anyway, Hokusai does use this kind of European color, this Prussian blue, but he clearly makes it his own. He's not trying to ape some kind of European print. All right. Is this moving? What's going on? Wow, it seems to be stuck. Okay, I'll come back. Part 2. Wait for it.